Welcome to our deep dive on the September 11th attack.
Ooh, it's a big one.
It is.
Yeah.
We're going to unpack a lot of information, but we're going to make it as fascinating as we can.
Yeah.
The initial idea was presented to Osama bin Laden as early as 1996.
Right.
That's years of planning.
Years.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, what makes this event so complex, is that it's not something that just happened out of the blue.
Yeah.
No. These seeds were sown years in advance with, meticulous planning and preparation.
Right.
Bin Laden, as the leader of al-qaeda, began laying the groundwork for his war against the U.S. in the mid-1990s.
I noticed the article mentions these fatwas that bin Laden issued in 1996 and 1998. Can you explain what exactly a fatwa is and how these play a role in all of this?
Sure.
Yeah.
So a fatwa is essentially a legal opinion or decree issued by an Islamic scholar.
Okay.
And so bin Laden's 1996 fatwa was essentially a declaration of war against the United States.
Really?
He called for the expulsion of American troops from the Arabian Peninsula and accused the U.S. of, waging war against Islam.
So this wasn't just about a specific policy or incident.
Right.
He viewed the U.S. as like an enemy of Islam
Exactly.
itself.
Yes, and I think the 1998 fatwa went even further,
Okay.
specifically targeting U.S. support for Israel.
Oh.
And the continued presence of American troops in Saudi Arabia, which is considered holy land by Muslims. So these fatwas essentially provided religious justification for violence against the U.S.
Okay.
and rallied his followers to the cause.
And it's chilling to see how bin Laden's words really translated into action.
Totally.
I mean, there's this quote from him about wanting to punish the, quote, oppressor by destroying towers in America.
Right.
And that wasn't just rhetoric.
Right, it was a blueprint.
It was a blueprint for 9/11.
For 9/11, absolutely.
It highlights just that deep-seated hatred that fueled these attacks.
It's scary.
And it's believed to be a reference to the destruction he witnessed in Lebanon in 1982 during the Israeli invasion.
Right.
He saw those crumbling towers and envisioned something similar happening in America.
Exactly. And I think, it's important to note that bin Laden wasn't the only one with this animosity towards the U.S.
Yeah.
Khalid Sheikh Mohammed was the principal architect of the 9/11 attacks.
Yeah.
And he played a critical role in making bin Laden's vision a reality.
The Wikipedia article mentions his name, but it doesn't really go into a lot of detail.
Yeah.
Who was he and what was his role in all of this?
Yeah, so he was a high-ranking member of al-qaeda.
Okay.
And he had a history of plotting terrorist attacks.
Really?
The 9/11 Commission report actually states that his animosity towards the U.S. stemmed from his, quote, violent disagreement with U.S. foreign policy favoring Israel.
Okay.
So he shared bin Laden's hatred
Interesting.
for the U.S. and its allies and saw the 9/11 attacks as a way to strike a blow against what he perceived as their enemies.
So these two figures, bin Laden and Mohammed, really spearheaded this horrific plot.
One the ideological side, one the operational side.
Yeah, and the article mentions that the hijackers themselves arrived gradually receiving training at flight schools right here in the U.S.
Yeah. This is a scary thought.
It is.
That they were preparing for this right under our noses.
Right under everyone's noses.
Yeah.
And knowing that it was years in the making, were there any missed signals along the way?
That is a good question, and it is one of the most debated aspects of 9/11. In hindsight, there were definitely missed signals and intelligence failures.
Okay.
Agencies like the CIA, the FBI, the NSA,
they
had bits and pieces of information.
Okay.
But there was a lack of communication and coordination.
So it's like a puzzle with missing pieces.
Yes.
They had some parts, but they couldn't see the whole picture.
Exactly.
Right.
For instance, there was a meeting of key al-qaeda figures in Malaysia that was observed by intelligence agencies, but it wasn't acted upon effectively. So the pieces were there, but they weren't being put together in a way that sounded the alarm bells.
Wow.
And there's even mention that some within al-qaeda itself were advocating for a delay. So if only they had prevailed.
Yeah.
It's a scary thought.
It is. It makes you consider all the what-ifs.
Yeah, all the way.
And the fragility of events leading up to such a tragedy.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
So all of this led up to those horrific moments.
Yeah.
On September 11th, 2001.
Let's talk about what happened that day.
Okay.
The article describes 4 coordinated attacks.
Yeah.
We had American Airlines Flight 11 crashing into the North Tower of the World Trade Center, followed shortly after by United Airlines Flight 175 hitting the South Tower. Then American Airlines Flight 77 struck the Pentagon in Arlington, Virginia.
Right.
And finally, United Airlines Flight 93, which crashed in a field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania.
A day of just unimaginable chaos and horror.
It's vital to remember the sheer scale of this tragedy.
Yes.
2,996 people were killed, including the 19 hijackers, and over 6,000 were injured.
Right, and it's easy to forget about the injured as well in all this.
It really had a devastating impact on families, communities, and the nation as a whole.
Absolutely.
And for the first time in American history, all civilian aircraft across the entire U.S. were grounded.
Yeah, it's an unprecedented measure that really underscored just the gravity of the situation.
Wow.
The entire country was on edge.
Yeah.
Grappling with fear and confusion and vulnerability.
Yeah.
Conflicting news reports were circulating.
Right.
Adding to the chaos and uncertainty.
Nobody knew.
No one knew what was happening.
What was happening?
What might come next.
It must have felt like the world had been turned upside down.
Absolutely. 9/11 marked a turning point in history.
Both for the United States and the world.
Yeah.
So we've set the scene. We've explored the roots of al-Qaeda's ideology.
Yes.
And their meticulous planning.
Mm-hmm.
But what about the response?
Right.
How did America react in those first terrifying hours and days after the attacks?
Yeah, what happened?
We'll dive into that right after that.
Right after this.
So we left off talking about all that chaos and fear right in the immediate aftermath of the attacks.
Right, trying to figure out what happened.
Yeah, so what was the initial response from the authorities?
Well, it was a scramble.
Yeah.
Those first frantic moments, a lot of confusion, as you can imagine.
Mm-hmm.
After the first plane hit the North Tower, the FAA, they notified NORAD, which is responsible for, aerospace defense in North America. And they scrambled 2 F-15 fighter jets from Otis Air National Guard Base in Massachusetts.
But as we know, they were tragically too late
to
intercept any of the high-tracked planes.
They were too late, and the delay was due in part to just slow and unclear communication from the FAA.
Oh, wow.
NORAD really had very little time to react.
Right.
Only about 9 minutes notice for that first flight, and no notice for the others.
Before they crashed?
Before they crashed.
So those fighter jets were essentially sent up with very little information about what they were dealing with, or even where to go.
Yeah, imagine that as a pilot, you're just told to go.
Yeah.
And you don't know what you're going to face.
That must have been incredibly frustrating for them.
Oh, absolutely.
Knowing they couldn't get there in time.
Yeah, and then more fighters were scrambled after the second tower was hit from Langley Air Force Base in Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
But again, too late.
Too late!
And 20 minutes after the Pentagon was struck, Vice President Cheney actually issued orders to shoot down any commercial aircraft that could be positively identified as hijacked.
But sadly, those orders came too late as well.
Too late.
I mean, it's almost unfathomable, right? The weight of those decisions.
Oh, I had to have been.
Just the feeling of helplessness?
The feeling of helplessness, yeah.
In those moments?
Absolutely. And here's something that I think really speaks volumes about the desperation of the situation.
Okay.
Some fighter pilots actually took to the air without live ammunition.
Without live ammunition? Why would they do that?
Because they knew that if they had to stop those planes, they might have to ram them.
Oh, wow.
With their own fighters.
Oh, my God.
They were prepared to give their lives when to prevent those planes from hitting their targets.
That's extraordinary.
It is.
Bravery.
Incredible.
It really shows the gravity of the situation. Everyone just trying to do
whatever they could to
prevent further loss of life.
And the FAA then grounded all civilian aircraft in the U.S.
The entire country's airspace.
Shut down.
First
time ever in U.S. history.
It's a stark visual, isn't it? I mean, the normally bustling skies, suddenly empty, the world holding its breath.
It really drove home the scale of this event.
The disruption it caused.
Yes.
Yeah.
And, as you can imagine, in the immediate aftermath, there was still so much confusion, conflicting news reports.
Yeah, this is before social media, remember, so information was spreading so much differently than it would today.
Exactly. There was even a report of a car bomb at the State Department in D.C.
Oh, wow.
That turned out to be false, but at the time...
that people were on high alert.
They were on high alert.
Yeah, fearing that another attack...
was imminent.
Yeah. Right. And I recall that case of mistaken identity with the Delta Airlines flight.
Oh, yeah.
It was suspected of being hijacked, but thankfully it was later confirmed that...
it was just responding to controllers.
Yeah.
And it landed safely.
Yeah.
In Cleveland, Delta 1989.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that even with, in those heightened tensions, you can have those misinterpretations.
Mm-hmm.
That's false alarms.
It's hard to grasp the immensity of it all.
It is.
We've touched on the casualties, but can you talk more about the human toll and the physical damage?
Of course. So, as we said, 2,996 people were killed in the attacks at the World Trade Center site. 2,753 people lost their lives, including 343 firefighters and 71 law enforcement officers.
Oh, my God.
And then at the Pentagon, there was significant damage, and one section of the building actually collapsed.
Wow.
But thankfully, it wasn't a complete structural failure.
Yeah, it's a testament to those first responders.
It is.
And their bravery.
Unwavering bravery.
Yeah, rushing into danger to save others.
Absolutely.
And then there's Flight 93,
yes,
which crashed in that field near Shanksville, Pennsylvania.
Such a story of courage and defiance.
It is.
On that flight.
Yeah, the passengers and crew fought back against the hijacker.
They did.
And because of their heroic actions, the plane crashed in that field instead of reaching its intended target.
Right.
It's believed to be either the U.S. Capitol building or the White House.
Right. Their actions potentially saved countless lives.
Yeah.
It's a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, even in the face of, unimaginable terror.
It's a powerful reminder that even in the darkest moments, there can be those extraordinary acts of heroism.
Exactly. And while the physical damage was immense,
right,
the impact of these attacks went far beyond just that.
Yeah, it wasn't just about the buildings that fell or the people we lost. It was a turning point in history.
It was a
collective trauma.
Collective trauma.
Yeah, that reverberated through every facet of American life and rippled out across the world.
You're exactly right.
9/11 sent shockwaves through American society.
It did.
It did.
There was an outpouring of grief and support.
Yeah.
And a sense of national unity that I hadn't really witnessed before.
Yeah, people searching for answers.
Yeah.
Demanding action-seeking solace in shared mourning.
Yeah, and a sense of, what now?
Yeah.
What do we do?
Right.
How do we move forward from this?
It certainly felt like a defining moment for an entire generation.
Yes.
And the government responded on multiple fronts, didn't they?
They did. Domestically, there's that surge in blood donations.
Yeah.
And countless first responders worked tirelessly at ground zero in the rescue and recovery efforts.
Yeah, just incredible displays of,
Yeah, the nation coming together.
Getting together, offering support and comfort to those who had lost loved ones.
Right. But then there were also policy changes.
Right.
The Patriot Act.
Yeah, I remember that being a big debate at the time.
Yes, aimed at strengthening national security.
Yeah, but a lot of people felt it infringed on civil liberties.
Exactly. It expanded surveillance powers.
Yeah.
For agencies like the NSA, allowed for the indefinite detention of immigrants suspected of terrorism.
Right.
So it sparked a lot of debate about the balance between security and freedom.
And it also led to the creation of the Department of Homeland Security, didn't it?
It did.
Yeah.
That was established in November 2002.
Okay.
To consolidate 22 existing federal agencies.
Really?
Related to national security and disaster preparedness.
Wow.
It was the largest restructuring of the U.S. government in modern history.
So they were trying to create a more unified and robust approach to these security threats.
Yes, they realized that there were gaps in intelligence sharing and communication between agencies.
Okay.
And so the goal was to streamline that information flow.
Okay.
And improve coordination to try to prevent future attacks.
What about the international response to 9/11?
Yeah, how did the rest of the world react?
Yeah.
Well, there was widespread condemnation of the attacks.
Okay.
And global expressions of solidarity with the U.S.
Right.
A lot of countries offered support and assistance in the investigation and in the subsequent war on terror.
Were there any exceptions?
There were few exceptions.
Yeah.
For example, Iraq's official statement was that American cowboys are reaping the fruit of their crimes against humanity.
Oh.
So,
still some tension there.
Yes, existing tensions that complicated the international response.
Right, but overall the international community was pretty united in its outrage.
Yeah, I think the attacks were seen as an attack not just on America, but on the world order.
Yeah.
And the very idea of, a civilized world.
And it's important to acknowledge the impact on Muslim communities worldwide.
Yes.
They faced increased scrutiny, suspicion.
Sadly.
And even a surge in hate crimes.
Yeah, it's a tragic consequence.
Yeah.
That, highlights how fear and prejudice can just flourish.
Right.
In the aftermath of these events.
Yeah, being associated with the perpetrators.
Right.
Even through shared religion, led to unfair treatment for many innocent people.
But a reminder that we have to, confront that dark side of human nature.
But returning to the global response, the Bush administration launched what they called the War on Terror.
Right.
The initial focus was on dismantling al-Qaeda and removing the Taliban regime in Afghanistan, which had been harboring bin Laden and his followers.
Right.
And this led to the U.S. invasion of Afghanistan.
Yes, in October 2001, the U.S., along with its allies, launched airstrikes against Taliban and al-Qaeda targets in Afghanistan.
Okay.
And this was followed by a ground invasion, which ultimately led to the overthrow of the Taliban regime.
But the war on terror went beyond Afghanistan, didn't it?
The Bush administration argued that the war on terror required this global effort.
Okay.
And that the U.S. would preemptively strike.
Wow.
Against any group or nation deemed a threat.
Hmm.
And so this expanded the conflict to other countries like Iraq,
right,
which was invaded in 2003,
right,
based on claims of, ties to terrorism and possession of weapons of mass destruction.
Okay.
Claims that were later discredited.
Right.
But nonetheless, it had a profound impact on U.S. foreign policy.
It did.
And military strategy.
Right, and it led to these prolonged conflicts in multiple countries.
Yes, and, in many ways it continues to this day.
Right.
In various forms.
Yeah, although the nature and scope of the conflict has definitely evolved over time.
Absolutely. The U.S. remains engaged in counterterrorism operations.
Right.
Around the world.
So it's clear that 9/11 had a lasting impact on U.S. foreign policy and military engagement. What about the domestic impacts, though?
Right.
What were some of the long-term consequences of the attacks here at home?
The attacks had a profound and lasting impact on American society.
Okay.
In many ways, beyond just the heightened security measures, at airports and public spaces.
Right.
There were significant, health and economic repercussions.
Let's start with the health issues.
Okay.
What were some of the health challenges faced by, those directly impacted by the attacks?
Well, one of the most devastating consequences was that toxic dust cloud.
Right.
That just enveloped lower Manhattan when the towers collapsed.
Yeah, I remember those images.
Oh,
people covered in dust?
Like something out of a movie.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, that dust was laden with all sorts of harmful contaminants.
Oh, wow.
Including known carcinogens.
Oh, my gosh.
Thousands of first responders and residents were exposed to this.
Right.
And, in the years since, many have developed serious health problems.
Like what?
Respiratory illnesses.
Okay.
Cancer.
Wow.
Mental health issues like PTSD.
So the health consequences of 9/11 continue to this day?
They do.
Wow.
There are ongoing legal battles over the costs of 9/11 related illnesses.
Okay.
And the government has even established programs like the World Trade Center Health Program to provide health care and compensation to those affected.
So it's a reminder that the impact of events like this can linger for years, even decades.
They do.
And it's not just about the physical health impacts.
Right.
It's also the psychological toll on survivors, families of victims.
Yeah.
And even the nation as a whole has been just immense.
Unimaginable trauma.
Yeah.
Experienced by those who witnessed the attacks firsthand or lost loved ones.
Right.
And it's important to acknowledge that those mental health consequences of 9/11 are just as real and significant
as the physical ones.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Right.
It impacted both the physical and mental well-being of so many Americans.
And then in addition to the health consequences, there were also the economic impacts.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah.
The attacks had a devastating impact on the U.S. economy, especially in New York City.
Yeah, the immediate fallout was immense.
Yeah.
Job losses, business closures, sharp decline in tourism.
Right.
The cost of rebuilding was astronomical.
And the airline industry was particularly hard hit.
Oh, yes.
Wasn't it?
Yes, the grounding of all flights and the subsequent increase in security measures had a ripple effect throughout the industry.
It's remarkable how quickly
the
attacks brought such a major industry to its knees.
Absolutely. And the economic impact wasn't limited to New York City or the airline industry.
Yeah.
The attacks triggered, a decline in stock markets and consumer confidence.
Wow.
Worldwide.
So 9/11 was truly a global event.
It was.
With economic repercussions felt around the world.
Yes, and the recovery was slow and uneven.
Okay.
Some sectors and regions bounced back more quickly than others.
Right.
But the scars of the attacks were felt for years.
Yeah, but amidst the tragedy and the aftermath, there was also an incredible spirit of resilience.
Absolutely. In the face of unimaginable loss, Americans came together to rebuild and remember.
Yeah, the rebuilding efforts at Ground Zero were particularly symbolic.
Weren't
they?
The construction of the new World Trade Center complex was a monumental undertaking.
It was.
And it really represented this defiant act of hope and renewal. One World Trade Center reaching a height of 1,776 feet.
Right.
It stands as a powerful symbol of American resilience
yeah.
and determination.
It's amazing to think that from the ashes of destruction rose such an iconic structure.
It is.
Yeah, and the 9/11 Memorial and Museum, located at the site of the Twin Towers, serves as a poignant reminder.
It does.
Of the lives lost and the enduring human spirit.
Yeah.
The reflecting pools which occupy the footprints of the fallen towers.
It's powerful.
They're incredibly moving.
I've visited the memorial myself.
Yeah.
It's a very powerful and emotional experience.
And there are memorials at the other crash sites as well, right?
Yes, at the Pentagon.
Yeah.
And in Shanksville, Pennsylvania.
Yeah, each of these memorials honors the victims.
Yes.
And serves as a place for reflection and remembrance.
Yes, and then there's that tribute in light.
Right.
Which illuminates the New York City skyline every year in the anniversary.
It's such a beautiful and symbolic gesture.
It is.
Those twin beams of light piercing the night sky.
A powerful reminder.
Yeah, of the lives lost and the enduring legacy of 9/11.
It's a powerful sight.
So even though the attacks brought unimaginable pain and suffering,
right,
they also inspired acts of incredible kindness, compassion, and unity.
Yes, in the face of tragedy, we see the best of humanity.
Yeah, those who were lost will never be forgotten.
Never.
Their memories live on in the hearts of those who loved them.
Yes.
And in the memorials that stand as testaments to their lives.
Beautifully said. And as we move forward, it's important to remember the lessons learned.
What do you mean by that?
Well, we need to remain vigilant in the face of terrorism.
Okay.
But we also need to be mindful of the dangers of fear-mongering and xenophobia.
Yeah, that's a really important point.
It is.
It's easy to let fear dictate our actions and policies.
Yeah.
But we need to strive for balance and reason.
Absolutely.
We also need to remember the importance of unity and compassion.
Yes.
You know, in the aftermath of 9/11, we saw how Americans from all walks of life came together to support each other.
Yeah.
That spirit of unity is something we should really strive to maintain.
Absolutely.
Even in the face of adversity.
We are stronger together than we are divided.
I like that.
And as we conclude this part of our deep dive, I want to highlight the ongoing legal proceedings related to the 9/11 attacks.
We haven't talked about that yet.
Yeah, this is a complex and often frustrating aspect of the aftermath.
Yeah.
You see, since all 19 hijackers died in the attacks, pursuing legal action against them directly was impossible.
Right, so the focus shifted to holding those responsible for planning and supporting the attacks accountable.
Exactly.
So who have they been trying to prosecute?
Well, the main target has been Khalid Sheikh Mohammed.
Okay.
The principal architect of the attacks.
Right.
He was captured in 2003 and has been held at Guantanamo Bay detention camp.
Okay. Ever since. And what's the status of his trial?
It's been a long and drawn-out process.
Okay.
He's faced numerous legal challenges and delays.
Right.
And his trial has yet to reach a conclusion.
So he hasn't been convicted of any crimes related to 9/11?
Not yet.
Wow.
The legal proceedings have been incredibly complex.
Okay.
And controversial.
It must be frustrating for the families of the victims.
It is.
To see justice delayed for so long.
They've been waiting for accountability for over 2 decades.
It's a reminder that achieving justice in cases like this can be incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
And time-consuming.
But
despite the challenges, the pursuit of justice continues.
It does.
In addition to Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, have there been any other convictions related to the attacks?
There have been a few peripheral figures who have been convicted.
Okay.
One notable case is Zacarias Moussaoui.
Okay.
He was arrested a month before 9/11 on immigration charges.
Okay. And what was his connection to the attacks?
Well, he was taking flight lessons.
Okay.
And had aroused suspicion at a flight school.
Interesting.
And during his trial, it was revealed that he had ties to al-qaeda.
Wow.
And had knowledge of the planned attacks.
But chose not to inform authorities.
So
he was essentially complicit in the attacks.
Yes, he was convicted of conspiracy to commit acts of terrorism.
Okay.
And sentenced to life in prison.
Wow.
Without the possibility of parole.
It's a reminder that even those who weren't directly involved in carrying out the attacks can still be held accountable for their role in supporting them.
Absolutely. And I think, the legal proceedings surrounding 9/11 really demonstrate the complexities of seeking justice in these extraordinary cases.
It's been a long and difficult journey.
It has.
For the families of the victims and for the nation as a whole.
Yes, but despite the challenges, the pursuit of justice and accountability continues, as does the process of healing and remembering.
Those are crucial points. Yeah. We must never forget the victims of 9/11 and the lessons learned from this tragedy.
Right.
But we must also look forward with hope and determination.
I agree.
Striving to create a world where Such acts of terror are never repeated.
Absolutely. I think that's a perfect sentiment to end on for this part of our deep dive.
Okay.
Let's delve into some final thoughts and reflections in our next segment.
We've really gone deep, haven't we?
We have. It's a lot to process.
It is, from the planning of the attacks to those missed signals, and then the chaos and the global impacts, and then the legal battles and the economic fallout and the health consequences.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It's a lot to absorb.
The 9/11 attacks weren't just an event, right? They were a culmination of so many things.
Right.
Historical forces, ideologies, individual choices.
It's incredible how much information is even packed into just that Wikipedia article.
Oh, yeah.
And with your guidance, we've been able to really uncover so many layers.
That's what I love about these deep dives.
Yeah.
We can sift through all the information and really bring out those key points for the listener.
Yeah. So as we wrap up,
yeah,
what are some of the most crucial things you think our listeners should take away from this exploration?
I think first and foremost, we must never forget the human cost of this tragedy.
Yeah.
The thousands of innocent lives lost.
Right.
The families forever shattered. The first responders who sacrificed their health in the aftermath.
Right. And it's a reminder that behind all the statistics and the analysis, there are real people.
Real people.
Whose lives were changed forever that day.
Changed forever. And beyond that immediate human toll, we have to acknowledge the impact 9/11 had on the world.
Right.
It reshaped U.S. foreign policy, led to the creation of new government agencies like Homeland Security.
Right.
And fundamentally altered how we think about security and freedom.
Yeah, it feels like the world as we knew it changed in just those few hours.
Yeah.
And it's still felt in our everyday lives, from airport security to global conflicts.
Absolutely. But while the attacks exposed those vulnerabilities and triggered all that fear, they also revealed incredible resilience.
Yeah.
We saw extraordinary acts of courage and compassion in the face of terror.
From the passengers on Flight 93 who fought back,
yes,
to the countless acts of kindness and support that emerged in the aftermath.
Yes.
It's a testament to the human spirit.
It is.
Finding strength in the darkest of times.
It really is. And going forward, I think it's about finding that balance.
Yeah.
Remembering 9/11, but not letting fear control us or erode those freedoms that we hold so dear.
It's a challenge, isn't it?
It is.
To find that balance between safety and liberty in a world that feels increasingly complex.
Absolutely. And, 9/11 wasn't an isolated incident.
Right.
It was a symptom of larger issues, ideological clashes, historical grievances.
So this deep dive has been about so much more than just 9/11.
It has.
It's about the complexities of terrorism.
Yes.
The balance of security and freedom, and the impact of trauma on individuals and on nations.
Yes, and it's about remembering those who were lost.
Yeah.
Honoring their memories, and using those lessons learned to create a more peaceful and just world.
Those are powerful words to end on.
Thank you.
This has given us all a lot to think about.
It has.
Thank you for sharing your expertise and helping us understand this pivotal moment in history.
It's been my pleasure, and I encourage our listeners to keep exploring this topic.
Yes.
Read more, ask questions, engage in thoughtful conversations about the legacy of 9/11 and how it shapes the world we live in today.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.
Thank you. 2014.